I just can't help but smile when I hear that music because it means that we are in for a treat. We've hit our audio cues, and it's time for another week of the Rec Poker Podcast, Forums Edition. I'm your host, Jim Reed, and you can find out about me and all the other members of the Wrecking Crew by going to rec.poker/crew. But I got to thank our friends, website AMP and Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino for letting this action-packed experience happen every week. I've got the best job in the world because every week I'm joined by this band of brothers and sisters who are here to share our love of poker with the world. Crew, why don't you introduce yourselves to Rec Poker Nation?
I'm Eric Jin. I'm known as Binkley on the Rec Poker Forum. You can find me on Twitter at RecBinkley.
I'm John Somsky. I'm also known as Poker Geek MN everywhere.
I'm Kim Kilroy. I'm Pet Vet most places, Fergie56 on PokerStars.
Well, thanks for joining me, gang. It's Monday night. We're playing in the nightly home game, the Play Money home game that we play every night. If you don't know what Rec Poker is, we're an online and live community of folks that like playing poker. We love playing, we love learning, we love sharing our stories and our bad beats and railing each other. And it's free to join. Go to rec.poker and sign up right now. If you do, you get to participate in the forums. So what we do every week is we take a post from the rec.poker forums, bring it here on the air and talk about it with the panel. So this week, we're taking a look at a post by I'm a Luigi, who is a friend of the forums here. He posts there quite a bit. Louie Hillman, who's also, I don't know if we have his, I don't have his Twitter handle up on the screen right now, but he's a fun follow on Twitter as well. Look up I'm a Luigi, and I'm pretty sure it's pretty tied into that. So Louie has a question here from playing in the money of the main event with about 44 big blinds, and the blinds are at 612. So this is a spot, we're all recreational players. We're in a big tournament like this. And, once you get down to 40 big blinds, you're definitely in a spot where any hand could be your last hand. So you really have to think about getting, I guess everyone has their own goals for this kind of a thing. But if you're trying to really maximize your odds of winning, you got to be really picking the spot to make good decisions here. And he puts an excellent post out here. So I'm a Luigi. Louie Hillman has the post. Daniel Hashem opens to 26K from middle position. He has about 1.5 million and a massive chip lead at the table with a VPIP of around 40 to 50, but he's playing very passively post flop. The button, which is to Louie's left, is playing very tight, and Hero does not remember him playing any hands since he was moved to the table about 2 hours ago. So the middle position player, Daniel Hashem, opens to about 2.2 big blinds, and Louie's sitting there with the king of spades, 8 of spades. Now, I think conventionally, this might be a marginal fold or a marginal call or a marginal 3-bet. It is one of those cusp hands that has some good qualities, but it's just not that strong a hand. Louie talks about that in his post and says that because the opener is playing so wide and because the button is playing so tight, he was inclined to call with this hand and essentially widening his calling range pre-flop. So if the person to your right is opening wide and the person to your left is tight, then you should definitely be shrinking your folding range. But whether we should be expanding our calling range or taking some of those hands and putting them into a 3-bet range is a question I thought we could talk about here with the group. So this is one of those hands that has a lot of things going for it. It's got a king blocker. It's got suitedness. It's got 2 cards higher than a 7. So some people would say those are great qualities for a call. Some people would say those are great qualities for a light 3-bet. What does the group here think? Does anyone have like a off the top, this is what they definitely prefer to do in this spot?
I looked this hand up on Floptimal. So Floptimal likes a us to play this hand in this position versus a low jack open, or versus the hijack open, and it likes us to raise 40% of the time and call 60% of the time. So with those sort of, with the dynamics at the table and with a tight player after us, I think this is more reason to just err on the side of raising when we are against a large stack that's opening too wide because they're opening so many hands. And we encourage the tight button to fold more hands. When they call us, if the button raises or calls us, we can get, if the button raises us, we can easily fold this hand. We don't have to go further with it. If the button folds and the original raiser 4-bets us, we can easily fold this hand. So, and if the button folds and the original raiser calls us, we're playing the pot in position as the aggressor. So I prefer the raise, but I don't mind the call, either one.
Yeah, I think what the hero is doing is he's considering himself to be on the button, because he said, I haven't seen this guy play in 2 hours. He's probably going to fold. He's kind of banking on that. He's like, well, in all probability, he's going to fold. So I'm the button. So, so I think his reasoning might be that, you know,
He
on the button,
assumes he's going to fold.
right? He assumes he's
Yeah.
going to fold. So when you're on the button, you do have, you can expand your calling range. You know, you
Right.
don't necessarily have to. So I think
Okay.
that's kind of the reasoning that went
Yep.
through his head.
Good.
Yep, I think that makes sense, and that is a big difference between having tight players to your left versus actually being able to feel like you're going to be on the button. Because I mean, when you are in the cutoff like that, and you can effectively play the button, that should shrink your folding range, like we talked about. So then you just have to decide if you're going to proceed as a call or a raise. And you know, in these spots where the solvers have it as a 60% call and a 40% raise, that's really just permission to deviate into either one of those areas according to the table conditions in your gut. So I like that. That makes sense. Are they, Kim, if you actually have that graph up at the moment, what are there some cusp hands near that are clearly more towards raising or more towards calling, or is a lot of it a mixed strategy?
King 9 suited and Queen 9 suited are more raises. And 10s, and obviously the ones for value, and then Ace 10 offsuit, Ace Jack offsuit, Ace King offsuit, Ace Queen suited, Ace King suited, and then some of our smaller suited aces, like Ace 6 suited, Ace 7 suited, Ace 8 suited.
Those are calls, or those are raises as well?
Those are more raised than call.
Yeah. Yep. And that's for the same reason that King 8 would be, I guess, because they've got the suitedness, the blocker value. So there's some playability there, but they're not actually a good enough hand to call with, like some of the better ones. Okay, cool. So that makes sense. So I would say Louie calling a position is well within a mixed strategy, and good conversation about whether to turn it into a raise or not. As it happens, the button does call. So that tight player is getting pretty good odds now in position. So they decide to come along. Everyone else folds. The flop comes King of diamonds, Jack of diamonds, 8 offsuit. So we've flopped top and bottom pair, 3-handed, and it is a pretty draw heavy board. There's 2 diamonds and there's 2 different straight draws on there. The original raiser checks. We bet about 70,000 into a pot of 120,000. So a little over half, which is appropriate given the dynamic board, I think. And the button overshoves for 523,000, which is quite a bit compared to our raise. And the other player folds, it's back to us. So this is the gross spot. We've got top and bottom pair. we have a player who called pre-flop. So they've got, the flop is king, jack, 8. So they've got pocket 8s. They've got pocket jacks. Maybe they raise pocket jacks, although this is a very tight player. So we don't know if what they're doing with jacks. We think they probably raise kings. So I don't think they've got top set. And I don't think they're playing jack 8 based on our description. So they could have 8s, could have jacks, could have king jack. Or they could have any number of diamond draws or queen 10 combos or 9-10 combos. There's a lot of draw possibility on a king jack 8 flop with 2 diamonds. So just at a very high level, gang, as described, what kind of range are we putting this player on when they make this very aggressive overshove on this flop?
I can tell you what the solver is putting them on.
Sure, okay, good enough place to start.
What they should be, the only time they should be shoving is with king jack, suited and offsuit. And then they should only be raising with pocket 8s, and they should occasionally shove some middle suited ace of diamonds. But as a bluff to offset top 2 pair.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not supposed to have jacks in their range, but when they do have jacks in their range, they prefer them to just call.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
So, and they're not supposed to ever have kings in their range, obviously.
Right.
So it really favors that the only hands that they're really doing this with, that they're even raising with, are king jack and pocket 8s, which we block that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So.
Oh, John, you're muted here. I don't know if looks like you're trying to jump in.
Yeah, of course I was.
It's very considerate.
It's interesting that, so it's a very tight player. So I'm trying to figure out what that means. How should we adjust? Because the call has me a little bit stumped. Because well, I guess it's way too big to shove. I don't think they would be calling with something like ace king. And they aren't short enough that they shouldn't be folding with or shoving with something like ace king on a flop like this.
Mm-hmm.
So
if we're not beat already, they definitely have at least a combo draw that is probably favored to win or at least flip by the river. And to me, this is like an easy fold versus that player type.
Yeah, Eric, jump in there.
Yeah, it looks like a fold. I mean, I can see a lot of hands that beat us that would do this. And, I'm questioning would the button jam with his draws? I mean, that's the question mark.
Mm-hmm.
And even if he does jam with his draws have a lot of equity.
Yes. That's the real key to me when I look at this. And I think, so let's say this was a really loose player and they were shoving with all their draws and some like thin value that we're actually beating right now. But we eliminate some of the stronger hands like jacks and kings because they would have 3-bet them pre-flop. And even maybe some of their king jack combos, they've 3-bet pre-flop in this spot. It's not crazy. Then I feel a lot better getting it in with top and bottom pair here because a lot of their range is draws or one pair hands that we're actually beating. But when it's this kind of player, they're not doing this with a pair of jacks. They're not doing this with, I don't think they're doing it with like king queen unless and they can't have king queen with the 2 diamonds. So I think like you said, Eric, not only are they beating us with the hands that they're beating us with, but the other hands that they're choosing to do it with, we're actually not crushing them just their draw equity is doing pretty well against us in this kind of spot. So versus that entire range, even though we can say, well, he's doing this with some diamond combos, he's doing this with some Broadway draw combos. Even if it's true, that entire range still has us in a pretty bad spot.
Right. And you got to think this is a player that hasn't played a hand in 2 hours.
Right.
And that has been sitting there playing for 4 days to get to the money in the main event. Right. So they're not going to be reckless.
Right. Yep, I think that's true. So let's hear from our friend Jonathan Little, and then let's talk about on the other side. Take 36 seconds to think about what we think the worst hand he could be doing this for value would be.
Have you ever wondered whether you should call a preflop raise or 3-bet instead? What do you do when you have a flush draw? Do you raise it or do you just call? What do you do with ace king when you miss the flop? Are you tired of guessing about what the right play is with your particular hand? Well, my name is Jonathan Little, and I am a 2-time World Poker Tour champion and creator of PokerCoaching.com, where we offer over 1,000 interactive hand quizzes where you play a hand and then get real-time feedback from our world-class pros. Don't guess and don't stress. Just register for your free account at PokerCoaching.com/recpoker right now.
There you go, folks. Rec Poker, or go to PokerCoaching.com/recpoker and try out what Jonathan Little's got over there at PokerCoaching.com. If you don't like it, he said he will give you a money-back guarantee. Just tell him that Jim sent you, and he'll take great care of you. So I just don't think this player is doing this even with King 8. I think they're only doing it with King Jack or Jacks or 8s of their value hands. And obviously we're crushed by that range. And I just don't see this player getting out of line with some of those draws. Yeah, Kim?
Do you think they do it with ace king, with the ace of diamonds?
It's a good example.
Because these tight players don't always raise ace king.
No, you're right.
Offsuit. But I mean, I don't know if they'd overshove there or just call there anyway and wait and see what happens.
Yeah,
because they're not afraid of another diamond coming, really, if they have the ace of diamonds.
I think you're right.
It would be more likely if they don't have the ace of diamonds.
Right.
They have ace king without the ace of diamonds.
Yep. Okay, so maybe ace king. Let's say maybe there's some combos of ace king. I again, I'm not sure this player type does as we've described them, because it feels like they don't want to go home on a second best hand, right? Like that's the player that we've talked about.
But I think they might have it. I think it's possible to have ace king here.
Yep.
I think it depends a little bit on what our image is to them
great
as well.
Points. Great
because if our image is just some wild, crazy, loose player, then they could definitely be shoving with ace king, because you're likely to make them uncomfortable. And if they shove, all of the decisions are over. And then it's just easy from that point on. But to make it this deep in the main event to day 4, it just seems like, you've got to be a better player than would generally do that.
And one thing we haven't mentioned is that the original raiser is still in the hand at this point. So the original raiser, all they've done is check this flop. So
and he doesn't say how many big blinds the button has.
No, he doesn't. The original raiser is quite deep.
Oh yeah, he has 500 and he has about the same.
Oh yeah, he did, because he had to shove all in. Yeah. Right.
So he's 40 something deep. Yeah.
So that, I think, honestly, and this the original raiser is the chip leader. And so when they're still in the hand, even though they're the one that's been opening a lot, if I'm this player that we're describing in the button, that makes me even less inclined to shove this when they're still in it.
Without a super nutted hand.
It'd be right. So, okay. So I think let's agree then that we're crushed by the value combos for sure. So it's king, jack, jacks, or 8s. Those are the value shoves.
And most likely jacks, because we block the king.
Right. Yes. And then let's say that he's also doing it with queen 10 of diamonds, 9-10 of diamonds, queen 9 of diamonds, and what?
I don't think so.
Ace 8 of diamonds.
Maybe
ace 8 of diamonds. Yep. Ace 8 of diamonds.
I don't think
maybe.
he's ever doing it with queen 9 of diamonds.
Right.
I mean, You have 2-hour levels. You don't have to do that.
Well, then okay, so even if he did, like we're definitely not loving life against that range. Those diamond draw, those combo draw hands that we just introduced are doing pretty well against us equity wise. All it takes is a diamond or a straight card to come in, and then it's going to be hard for us to catch up without boating up. And are there any other hands? Yeah, this is another one of those spots where I just don't see enough non-value hands in the range for me to feel like we, again, given that also it's a huge overbet. It's like, what are we looking at here?
40 big blinds
Yeah.
into what, 7?
Oh.
7 or 8 big ones?
Yeah, it's
right?
like another 7. It's another 7
no,
times the.
It's 4.5
it's
times
into-
the pot.
Yeah.
Right. It's into like 11 big blinds. So.
Yeah, he does put the bet out there.
Or
Oh yeah, no, it's 10 big blinds. The flop's 122,000.
Yeah.
So it's 10 big blinds, the flop.
plus the hero's bet.
And he bets 6 or so. Yeah.
70K.
Six,
So
yeah.
Okay. I think it's just what people do when they just don't want to see flush draws call and
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
Some people aren't comfortable playing all the streets.
Yep. Well, and it is it's an awkward stack size, because if he makes a small bet, if he calls here, then he doesn't want to he doesn't want to see any more cards, for one thing. So he wants to put a raise in. But if you look at the amount that he could raise it to, a lot of those raising sizes, he's not going to have a pot size bet left on a future street. And I'm not sure if that's something he's thinking about, but
I'd be a lot more uncomfortable as the hero if this had just been a raise.
Mhm.
I would have a harder time deciding what to do versus
Mhm.
just a raise.
Mhm.
When it just goes all in, I don't know. I just think you've still got 40 big blinds in
in the main event.
in the main event. That's heaps. That's heaps.
Yeah. So if the hero had 20 big blinds,
Yeah, then he's
Then-
realizing.
then I think it's probably a call. You just don't have enough chips to not
Mhm.
give that a shot. But in this particular case with the main event, I mean, if you double up, you're going to be at 40 big blind, or 80 big blinds, but which is better, but it's not that big of a difference. I don't know. For me, if I were playing the main event, I'd hope that I would fold in this situation.
Mhm.
I'm not saying I would, because in the moment, who knows what my brain's going to do, but I think folding is probably the right play.
We get a great comment, and I encourage everyone to go and we try and review these forum posts on the air as best we can, but there's no substitute for going and reading the actual posts and seeing people upload, screenshots and charts and graphs and their own solver outputs and stuff like that. But we get a couple comments here from the conversation that I want to draw attention to. So one's from Sir Gas Leak, who says, I've never played the main event before, so take this with a grain of salt. But to me, this all comes down to how many draws he might have in his range, because you're in bad shape against all his made hands. You block top and bottom sets. Top is unlikely anyway, says Sir Gasleak, but you're way behind Jack Jack if he flats that pre and King Jack. Doughty's calling pre with Jack 8. You're flipping against all his good draws, and you're well ahead of his decent ones, hands like Ace 2 of diamonds. So you need a bunch of those in there to make the call. If we limit his range to jacks, King Jack, and some diamond combos that also have some straight draws, you're in rough shape. And I think that's similar to the line we've taken here in the discussion group. And then we get a comment from Chris 5x5 Jones here, talking about how he feels sick about it. He's never going to tell anyone, but if we haven't lost that much yet, we can just get away from this hand by folding. And he just doesn't think that this villain is going to risk their entire main event on an unmade hand. And we're behind all the made hands. So, I mean, I think there's something to that. So I guess for this group, what would the range have to be that we would put our opponent on to make calling with king 8 here something that we felt good about? Because we can say, oh, well, if they were a more aggressive player, or if the stacks were this, but what actual range of hands, how wide would it have to be for us to feel good about calling with king 8 here, given that they have all these 2-pair hands that have us beat, they've got the sets, they've got the strong draws. I think for me, by the time they're betting their 1-pair hands down to jacks, then I'm feeling a lot better about getting it in here, but I just don't think many players are going to make that error.
Plus, they still have the pre-flop raiser behind,
Oh yeah, right.
who could have aces.
Right.
If we think they have jack 8, then I'd feel more comfortable calling, right?
Yeah.
But if we eliminate jack 8, then it's a fold.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But I think Louie, from the way Louie is writing the hand, the post, he obviously recognizes that he's behind all the made hands that are value betting here. And I think he recognizes the strength of the range that proceeds. So the question really is just how much garbage is in that range? Not garbage. How many sub premium hands are in that range such that we don't just throw up in our mouth at the thought of of calling? Yeah, and it's interesting because, even if you told your opponent that you're doing this, let's say we're the button here for a second. Even if we told our opponent, I'm going to raise all in here, and I've got either a very strong draw or 2-pair plus here, you should still fold in Chris's spot, or in Louie's spot here, I think, because it sounds like that's a range that is bluffing half the time, but even those bluffs have really, really good equity against you. So even though he's bluffing, you should still just fold. So they have to be doing that with a lot of hands that you're way ahead of to make it worth it when it's to that sizing, in my opinion. Any other thoughts on this before we roll on out after another fun night? It's just overbets are weird. Kim, you said something here about that if it was a smaller raise, you'd be more comfortable calling.
No, I'd have a more difficult
you'd be more
decision.
difficult decision. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think this is a fairly easy fold for all my chips in the main event.
And do you
versus this profile?
Versus this profile, yes.
Yeah.
So do you think that versus this profile, when people make the call me sizing raise, that's a stronger range than when they make the shove raise? Because it never has those draw combos in there.
Like, I think that this player could do this with ace king, could raise here with ace king, for instance.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So now I'm like, okay, are they doing this with ace king? Like, is
Right.
that in their range now? Right. So.
And that makes it a tougher decision.
Makes it a tougher decision.
Because you're ahead of more of the hands that take the smaller sizing.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. All right. Well, I want to put a big thank out to Louie Hillman and to Sir Gas Leak and Chris Jones 5x5 for posting in the forums. And of course, website AMP and Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casinos. My good friends John Somsky, Eric Jin, and Kim Kilroy, and you, the listeners. See you next week. Thanks, guys.